This program features live coverage of an African safari and may include animal kills and carcasses. Viewer discretion is advised.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to an overcast and wonderfully cool Djuma Private Game Reserve in the Sabi Sands here in South Africa. We are sitting watching quite an unusual sunrise this morning. It seems that our cloud cover has been building quite strangely since yesterday afternoon, and we've been getting some very unusual colors while we appreciate the views right from last night all the way through to this morning. My name is Tessa. I'm going to be your guide and safari here this morning. Behind the camera is Owen, and we are actually just starting our morning by listening. So we're sitting up on quarantine. We have been watching as the light's changing all the way across the valley, watching the clouds build up, and just having a listen in case we can hear any animals this morning. And already we have heard some unhappy sounding elephants towards Gari Dam. So that's actually going to be where I'm going to start my bumble towards this morning. You can see it is quite misty. It's around 19 degrees Celsius, maybe a little bit cooler this morning. And we are expecting, hello birds, we are expecting rain around lunchtime. So hopefully this morning we managed to stay dry. We would love to hear from you this morning. So if you have any questions or comments, please do get hold of us. You can find us at #WildEarth on Twitter. If you're under the age of 18, pop us an email on kidsquestions@wildearth.tv, or you can register on the WildEarth website, head over to the channel page and submit your questions there. Myself, JP, and Lauren are really looking forward to hearing from you and answering your questions. So you can see we have got some impalas up on quarantine this morning. This is not a surprise. We had quite a cool evening, and with it being overcast, there would have been a few more predators that would have been active. And so the impalas are waiting for it to heat up a little bit before they actually move off. They're trying to stay safe in the open areas overnight and through the early hours of the morning. It is quite a large herd, but they are fairly spread out, and I'm sure they're going to be heading towards Gari Dam just now as well. And you can just see them moving through the long grass. Our plans for the day, I'm going to be going from Gari Dam down towards Gari Main, and what I'm hoping to find for you this morning are elephants and the predators. So we're going to see if we can find any leopards. We know Marips was very close to Twin Dams last night. We also know the lions have been moving around a bit. Oh, look at the sun, Owen. I want to show you these colors on the sun, everybody. We've got a little bit poking out of the clouds now. And we're also hoping to find some smaller things today. So I'm going to be looking for some butterflies, some unusual insects, and as many birds as we can show you. I'd also love to do a bird call challenge with you today. So at some point during the drive, I'm going to try and see if we know what bird calls we have. Anna Marie, I'm so happy that you're settled and ready to bumble. I hope you've got some yummy snacks with you, maybe some coffee, and ready to get going this morning. But let's just have a look at the sun as it's rising over the clouds and just listen to the dawn chorus around us. It really is one of the most beautiful mornings we've had. There is no breeze, and the bush is just coming alive as that sun is rising. Have a listen. Momo, I agree. Watching the sun rise behind the clouds, seeing the colors change, it really is one of the most unusual sunrises we've had in a long time. We had some very strange reds last night and right the way through to this morning, bouncing off the bottom of the cloud layer, and it just seems like it's been a very unusual last 12 hours in terms of light out here in the bush. So I can hear a lot of birds in the drainage lines surrounding Quarantine. Quarantine is like the island. There's 4 drainage lines, one on each side. And I can hear a lot of birds that are busy starting to call this morning. So I think it's going to be an absolutely excellent day in terms of birds and all of the other animals coming out. I'm hoping we get a bit of rain at lunchtime. But speaking of, let's have a look at what our weather is doing for the morning while I head towards Gowrie Dam.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the other half of the Djuma team, Team Wendy. We are bumbling slowly towards our hyena den. Not really had much activity there in the past few days, so I'm having withdrawal symptoms, I'm sure you can imagine. But it's a strange morning. The sun is not quite bursting through the way I hoped it would be. Very, very cloudy, but as long as there's no rain, we should survive and we should be okay at the end of the day. So good morning, everyone. My name is Lauren and I do have Khat on camera with me today, and we are going to keep bumbling. That's because time is of the essence, and as I always say, that first hour in the morning is really important, at least to me, to try and cover all bases. On a morning like this, the animals 100% will be moving, most of them. It's still very, very cool. I have a funny feeling the sun will burst through and it'll be a very hot afternoon, but for now it's cool. And I want to catch up with the Djuma clan. And then, I do have a plan today. I am going to try and loop around onto Cheetah Cut Line and check for Kalamba Cross. Crossie's back in, I'll follow up. If she's still on Torchwood, then naturally I can't follow up and I'll need to make a new plan. I hope they were just taking a little stroll into Torchwood. They went in a pipe road. So it's not as if, which is quite north, it's not as if they went in at the central area, which takes you right in front of Torchwood Camp to Mareeb's just stayed there forever. It's not as if she went in that way, so I'm hoping she maybe just went in a little bit and came back. Wishful thinking, I don't know. There's nothing bad about her going into Torchwood. I'm taking it from a very selfish point of view. I don't want her going into Torchwood. But there's nothing bad about it at all. Chilly, but I'm going to refuse to put my jacket on today. I'm trying to brave it out. Okay, the hyena den is literally just around the corner, so I really hope it's active, but we're going to send you guys back over to Tessa.
Oh, I really do hope that hyena den is active today as well. It's always a fun and entertaining morning when you can go and sit there and watch the little cubs. So I'm just about to arrive at Gowrie Dam. I'm coming down towards the clearing now from Quarantine. And I just want to head up onto the dam wall and see what we've got this morning. I can see a few impalas in the distance. I can hear some birds. So I'm hoping that we might have maybe the hippo still here, possibly some other animals as well. So dams to me are one of the best places to check the bush newspaper. And that's because during the night, as much as during the day we see animals coming down at specific times or during specific periods, the same thing happens at night with our nocturnal animals, and most of our nocturnal animals are the predators. And those are exactly the kinds of things we're wanting to find. So I know that there's lion tracks here, for example, because not last night, but the night before, lions moved up here. And so that is what we're looking for every time we come past the dams early in the mornings or as we start the afternoon. We're looking for tracks, we're listening for sounds. And at the same time, we're here to appreciate some of the view and hopefully get some really nice birds in too. So I do want to see what we can find up on the dam wall. Oh, it looks so peaceful. Because there's no breeze, the surface of the water looks like glass this morning, like a mirror. Oh, I can see the grey heron. Right. Look at the surface of the dam. It is literally like glass. Oh, there's so many birds calling as well. I can't see the hippo yet, but we have got a bachelor herd of impalas that seem like they may have slept at the dam last night. A little bit unusual. And it looks as though they're all still waking up. There's only 2 that are actually up and feeding. The rest of them are still relaxing, lying in the soft grass. Okay, so I'm going to stick around here for a few more minutes and just listen for those elephants that we heard earlier. But while I do that and appreciate a bit of the view of the dam, let's head over to JP, who's also appreciating a morning view.
Good morning and welcome to Eco Training Pridelands. We've had a busy morning so far, following up on several alarm calls of vervet monkeys. We're very hopeful of actually locating lion. However, it turned out empty in our search, and the only things that we could find was the tracks of a hyena, but we still will continue looking for them. So my name is JP LaRue, and behind the camera we've got Darby. This morning we've also got a stunning sunrise, and if you have a look a little bit closer, you'll also see a lot of interesting patterns of the clouds in the background. And these clouds are called cirrus clouds, and what fascinates me about them is that they're actually suspended ice crystals, and they're also very high clouds, which is probably between 6,000 and 12,000 meters in altitudes. We're just going to open up on that sunset from here, allow you to listen to the different sounds of birds in the background, and enjoy, our sunrise in the distance, and enjoy that sunrise. You also might hear a number of different bird calls. They include Birchel's cuckoo, as well as a sitting cisticola, which is calling above us, and the distant alarm call of baboon. Good morning and welcome back to Eco Training Pridelands. We're just enjoying a beautiful sunrise with a beautiful clouds, which is called cirrus clouds in the background. And just as mentioned earlier, they actually suspended ice crystals, and these clouds are incredibly high clouds, and they're generally indicators of warm fronts, and that there will be a cold front to follow very soon. And it does look like rain that's coming our way in the next day or two. And meanwhile, let's enjoy our sunrise and listen to the different sounds of nature in the background. They include the calls of both fork-tailed drongo, some crickets, and a little bit earlier Birchel's cuckoo, and the distant alarm calls of baboons.
sitting at Gari Dam, and we have been just taking a little bit of a look around, getting a head count on which animals are here. And our little Egyptian goose family seems to be awake and coming down towards the water's edge. So I'm trying to get a head count on them. I can see 3 next to the log on the left, and I think 4 on the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There should be 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm only getting a 6 for now. Oh, there's a pied kingfisher again. I'm going to keep trying to count those geese. Polly, good morning from all of the goslings over here. Certainly a very fun little family to watch, and I'll go back over to them just now. But for now, have a look how this pied kingfisher is hovering. It must be quite difficult actually with the surface of the water being, oh wow, so smooth. It's reflective like glass, so this pied kingfisher is having to use its very good eyesight to try and look for movements and shadows in the water. And one of the only kingfisher species that almost exclusively eats fish instead of insects. Fish and amphibians and some aquatic insects, but mostly aquatic animals, as opposed to things like the woodland kingfisher, which we mostly actually see away from the dams, and they're looking for proper insects, things like grasshoppers, katydids, all of those things. Let's see if we can count them. 1, 2, 3 going to the left, 4, 5 behind the mum. I think that's 6 behind the mum as well. This is actually quite difficult to count. Definitely 3 there. There's another one. 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. I feel better now. There's still 7 little ones. Janet, one of the first ways that Egyptian geese protect their young from predators is choosing a very smart nesting site. So a lot of Egyptian geese actually nest on the ground, but they'll have a very well camouflaged nest, or they might find unused eagles' nests or things like that, and often they'll reuse those high up in trees. The second way that they would do it is to have camouflaged babies. So yes, these little ones are slowly starting to resemble the parents with their feathers, but in fact they looked quite mottled and fluffy when they were younger and very grey. And that's so that they can blend in with the ground where they are walking around feeding. But Egyptian geese are actually very tenacious. They will come flapping their wings and calling so loud that it gives you a headache if you walk close to their babies, and they will then also be able to instruct, if I can call it that, instruct the babies to move. So not only will they chase you, not only will they have camouflage and smart nesting sites, but you'll see all the babies are close to the parents most of the time, unless they're chasing blacksmith lapwings around or having races. And if the parents start to move quickly, the babies can run incredibly fast. So these goslings will have good speed on them. They will follow one of the adults, and the other one might either run towards a predator or distract a predator, or just be a little bit tenacious, give them a bit of attitude by calling really loud right next to them, flapping their wings towards something. Geese can actually be very intimidating. So it will depend on the area that you're in, it will depend on where the nesting site has been. But in general, geese are very tenacious and quite intimidating. When I was younger, I was always a bit intimidated by geese and swans and turkeys. I wasn't the biggest fan of big birds coming at me on the floor. I actually had literally a very shocking experience. We went to go and have a look at some ostriches, and they had one single strand of electric fencing, which I had not noticed in my excitement to go and see the ostriches. And maybe that's where my fear of big birds came from. I don't know, very possibly. But I was running down this little slope to have a look at these ostriches and wasn't really concentrating. And as I was stopping next to the fence line, I stopped myself by putting both my hands straight onto the electric strand and knocking myself backwards with a very big shock. And I think maybe that's where my slight fear of birds came from. Maybe I associate big birds with pain. Wasn't a very smart move. Not my finest moment, but at least we can laugh about it. So interestingly enough, there are actually predators that you wouldn't think of when you're looking at something like goslings like this. As much as we are worried about things like leopards or servals on the bank, don't forget that there's also going to be things like martial eagles, Wahlberg's eagles. All of the big birds of prey will be coming over the dams to look for food. And at the same time, things like crocodiles in the water, very grumpy hippos can often go for things like Egyptian geese and their goslings. But probably the most unusual predation I have seen and heard of on more than one occasion now, I think it's twice I've heard of it, but the most unusual is actually octopus. So Egyptian geese have a very wide distribution, and you'll find them along the coastlines where there's salt water, so it's not just fresh water. And in salt water there's a lot of marine species, and goslings there are actually in danger from octopus as well. We have actually seen it. My parents in particular, my mom was very heartbroken about it, but there were some goslings in Port Alfred where my parents stay, and while she was watching them come past the rocks, an octopus came up from underneath the water and pulled a gosling down by its foot, straight under the water, and it's a big octopus. So it's not the conventional predation, but it is still something that Egyptian geese have to think of as something coming up from underneath the water. And the parents in particular were so protective. They were trying to dive under the water to try and get the octopus to let go. The other goslings moved off with all the commotion, so they had the instinct to get themselves out of the area. But the parents were very unhappy, and they were making a lot of noise and trying to dive under the water. But of course an octopus is so strong once it's got its grip on something that it can just pull it straight underneath the water. So just an unusual form of predation. I wouldn't really know, other than trying to intimidate a predator. I wouldn't really know how Egyptian geese would try and prevent that type of predation. Unusual to think about.
We're still just driving, which is really important in the morning if you want to figure out where everything has moved. You leave it too late, vehicles will have driven up and down, animals will have moved off or gone flat. I don't know if I'll get lucky today, but this is really the perfect weather, that's for sure. It's also very peaceful, not too hot. The birds are starting to chirp, chirp, chirp. Summer is such a blessing here, but it's also tricky. Also makes finding animals extremely tricky. Or should I say challenging? That's a better word. I really wish spiders would not build their webs across the road. We need to teach spiders not to do that. I am really crossing all of my fingers and toes this morning for a leopard. I think that would be really delightful.
Morning stations, I'm getting mobile. Any updates?
And it's a very important thing to listen to your game drive in the morning. Know what is happening. Okay, we're gonna keep bumbling and see what we can find. We had a drag mark, which was actually very exciting, with predator tracks, I think leopard behind it. It went into Little Gowrie. It crossed Gowrie Main at that big dip and into Little Gowrie. So we can't follow up, but naturally we can give the guys in the east the information, and they can. It's the first time I've had a drag mark in a while. Almost could have been for an exciting morning. Hyena Day not active. So we are going to head east now. And once we get east onto Cheetah Cut Line, we shall search for Tlalamba. Now, it's going to require a bit of doing. It's going to require just driving really, really slowly, probably going to first gear low range, and just checking the entire boundary line very, very carefully. Because there's not that much ambient light. It's really overcast. And that's our mission. Where are the hyenas? I do not know. They're clearly occupied somewhere. But that drag mark, I wonder if it... Nah, I'm guessing, I'm speculating, but it was on Gowrie Main, in the area that Mareeves was called in last night. He was on Juma last night, and I just wonder if that's been him, and he's cut back over to Little Gowrie. Of course, the boundary lines don't matter for the leopards, but they matter for us. But anyway, I'm going to try and really focus on Tlalamba and cubs for now. Michelle, it really depends. Generally, they are nocturnal in terms of the most of their activity. I'm so torn where to go right now. I actually think I'm gonna take this road. So they are nocturnal, but naturally we see them during the day. They will move, especially in cooler weathers, overcast conditions. If they have a kill, they will feed on it throughout the day. So it really does depend, but predominantly they are classified as nocturnal animals, where the most of their activity takes place at nighttime. Lions, hyenas, and leopards are primarily nocturnal out here. Oops, spiderweb. And that's why you wake up in the morning and you've got to figure out where they've gone. Look for tracks, smells, drag marks, signs, sounds, and try and figure out what happened last night. And that's why I love the sunrise safari. I love it, I love it. Sunset doesn't have the same energy for me. Oh, yo, look at that view. You see how overcast it is today. There really just is no light. Beautiful. Let's keep moving. MK, separate individuals, no. But mother and cub, yes. You will find leopards together, mother and cub. Or mother and offspring. Mating leopards have been known to share carcasses, but generally speaking, no. They will not sort of form a unit and go hunt cooperatively. That is not a leopard's superpower. But you will find mother and cub. Mareebs and Tandy, for example, would do that together. But maybe not so much soon. Freddie, no, it was very, very tough. It was down in that dip by Gowrie Main, so crosses the Mowati over really hard terrains. I don't know, I would guess something small. Wasn't the size of an impala, but possibly Steenbok, Diker, something much smaller. But I will have to naturally hand that over to the guys in the east. I miss that excitement, you know, being hot on the heels of tracks and hearing alarm calls and drag marks. It's not really happening so much here anymore. We're either in the wrong areas or just because it is so thick, a lot of the activities happening in blocks. But definitely something smaller than an impala size. Oh, sorry, butterfly. I just woke you up. Ah, it's gone black again. Okay, I'm gonna keep just looking for any sign of Klalamba for now, and we're gonna send you guys over to Tessa, see what she's up to.
That certainly sounds like a wonderful adventure finding leopards. I am actually busy tracking lions at the moment. I've noticed some lion tracks coming up from where we had the Nkuhumas yesterday towards the dam. So I've just arrived back at Gowrie Dam. And I'm just having a look where these lion tracks go. They are quite large tracks, which means it is a little bit easier for us to work out where they have come from and where they are going to. And I am noticing a little bit of a tawny patch, so I just want to have a quick scan with my binoculars before we go anywhere else. No, it's sand. But I think what's happened is there's a drainage line coming into Gowrie Dam along Mvubu Road, which is one of my favorite roads, and I think they will have gone past the dam and up there. I just want to turn here and come back down and check that junction again. It looks like one track went that way and two came up, but because of the hard soil here you can't see the tracks. So I just want to turn and have another look. We did not see any tracks outside of DRC, outside of our camp. So I don't think they went as far as quarantine. I think they went on the other side of the drainage line. So I want to go and check basically on that side of the drainage. Maybe we'll be lucky. Good morning, woodland kingfishers. Everybody's loud this morning. I love it. Normally I'm the one that talks the most, but I think the woodland kingfisher's giving me a run for my money this morning. Right, let's check this very sandy junction again. It'd be very interesting if they've come straight past camp again and moved back north, because they've been having some very weird movements recently, these three. Moving up and down, but possibly trying to find the rest of the pride at this point. We're actually in 2 minds about that, okay. So they're definitely going a diagonal actually up towards the dam cam, which is quite interesting. So I think what I'm actually going to do is, instead of coming around and doing a Vubu Road from this side, I'm actually going to go back up towards camp and do it from the other side, just to make sure that I'm not missing anything up past quarantine and north on Vuyatela access. I think that's the best idea. Safari, it's normally anywhere from 2 years old. I would say more towards 2.5, 3 would be the average. Because at that age, you can imagine a young male lion is starting to beef up quite a lot. He's starting to get very bulky. His testosterone levels are really heightening in his body. And his mane will be starting to come in really nicely. So at that point, it starts becoming evident that he might be a threat to the males in the pride, the big males. And that's when they start being pushed out by the pride. There are exceptions to the rule. The young Birmingham males stayed for much longer than that, and now I believe it's the Torchwood males. But yeah, there's definitely exceptions. It's normally at around, I would say, 2.5 to 3 years old is the average. It's a natural mechanism that lions have to prevent inbreeding too much. So actually, young male lions have probably one of the most difficult lives out here, if you think about it. Oh, there's 3 ground scraper thrushes here. Thrushes. So it looks like we've got 1 just on the ridge and then 2 higher up. Quite unusual. So as much as we're not really seeing as many birds as we used to, in terms of the normal time of the year, because there's normally a lot more insects around, ground scraper thrush, which I've never seen regularly. I have seen so many of them in the last week here at Djuma, and you'll see them on the roads like this, looking for insects. They also really enjoy earthworms, so they spend a lot of their time digging in little holes in the ground. But it looks like we've got quite a lot of them moving through this open area of the road. So this is one of the more unusual looking birds. You can see it kind of bounces around and then stops every now and then, so I'm hoping you do get to you do get to see a close-up. But it's got the most beautiful black and white markings down the side of the face and then streaking and spots down onto the stomach. It's actually got a chagra with it there that it didn't look too happy with. But as it looks to the side, have a look at that black and white streaking down the side of the face. Absolutely gorgeous bird. And this is very typical hunting behavior. Foraging by moving very quickly and then standing still for a while. It's half the element of surprise and half speed. Ah, there's the chagra. The chagra is back. Interesting to see them so close together. It's not often that different species of birds that feed on the ground will tolerate each other. Panda Po, I'm actually not sure where the name thrush came from. To be perfectly honest with you, it's a bit of an unusual name, and I'm not sure if it has a very particular origin, to be perfectly honest. Go ahead. I'm just chatting on the radio with Elias.
Which areas are you checking so I can try some other roads that you not check?
I'm going to check towards Mvubu Road from quarantine. Okay, so Elias is also looking for some lions this morning. And because I found the tracks coming up past Gowrie Dam,
Where did you turn on the Gonzo? Then maybe I can
so I'm going to just chat with him on the radio a bit about the plan so we can work together. Elias, I had the tracks on Twin Dams Road.
Where did you let's see in Ponzo, then maybe I can just
Okay, so
which levels can I check?
I'm still chatting with Elias on the radio, and I'm just going to watch these ground scraper thrushes while I chat with them. We left the tracks at Gowrie Dam with the junction towards the lodge. And him and I are actually going to try and work together this morning, so we're going to check different roads and see if we can track these lines. I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking for the rest of the Nkuhumas. But it looks like our ground scraper thrushes are being quite successful this morning. They're moving around very quickly, picking up insects. I think they're taking advantage of the nice cool weather, so let's just watch it for a little bit and listen to all of the woodland kingfishers and other birds around us. I'm sure it won't be long until they are back on the road again. Very unusual to see so many of them together, actually. For me, anyway, in particular. I'm going to carry on now that they are moving off a little bit. But I have not been lucky enough to see many thrushes in close proximity to each other, but also just very populous in an area, so it's been absolutely wonderful to see quite a few of them in the last week here at Djuma. I'm wanting to go around towards Mfubu Road and check if we can catch up with these lion tracks. Definitely not seeing any lion tracks here. Yeah, I'm not seeing any lion tracks coming up here, so I do think that they cut across the dam and up towards the drainage line, and that's where I want to go around and have a look now. Wish me luck, I'm sure we're going to pick up on the tracks again, but it's always good to have somebody backing you.
Welcome back to Eco Training Pridelands. We're located on a herd of impala. There's both male as well as females in this group. Generally, when we do look at impalas, we'll notice that it's only the rams that has horns and the females that don't. However, there is an exception in the rule, and we have a female that actually has horns. And quite often when we do find females with horns, it's very narrow at the base and not broad at the base like that of the males. And we just double checked and made sure underneath the tail that it's definitely a female, and yes, there is no scrotum. Here we go, and we can see there's some deformity in the horn as well, where one is pointing forward and the other one is pointing to the side. We often find this to happen with a number of different antelope species. However, I've seen it mostly happening to impala. Some of the other antelopes we've also seen females with horns in the past is actually Nyala. It's not only with antelopes that this happens. We often see that in some cases that even with lions, that they can have male-like characteristics. And a few years ago, there was a record of a lioness that actually had a mane. And that was in Botswana, if I remember correctly. And this lioness actually was killed eventually by males, as if they considered her as a competition for them. And the interesting thing that they reckon why she actually eventually developed a mane was because of a large amount of testosterone which she was exposed to while still inside the womb. We're just going to keep on watching our impalas. We're busy both browsing and grazing, and this is one of their superpowers, and this allows them to actually be in good condition throughout the year instead of just focusing on eating grass or just focusing on eating leaf material. A few other things that we also will notice is that they have a very short lambing period, and the majority of them will have their young with a few days apart from one another. And by simply flooding the bush with young, inexperienced impalas, the effect of predation is far less on that group of impalas than it would be if the births were scattered throughout the year. Something that we often forget about when it comes to impalas is pointing out the coloration pattern. And you'll see that they've got a number of different coloration patterns, being from dark on top to lighter underneath. And when it does come to these counter-shading patterns, that's to break up the pattern or the shape of the animal. And especially when a predator that views their prey in black and white in color, especially when the animal is standing against strong sunlight, it doesn't make it out as a shape of an impala, but a number of different shapes. We also see those little black lines on the backside. It's also most likely there to break up the shape of the animal. Some of the other things that you'll notice is also that their muzzle is very slender, which allows them to really put it in between little places, which is hard to reach for larger grazing species and browsers. Something has just caught their attention. They're very, very alert at the moment. I think it's because this breeze is swirling the whole time, and they're not 100% sure what is going on around them. Good morning, Candice, and welcome to the show. I've never really noticed that they will do that, but I have seen impalas that do get lost out of groups and then go on their own. But when we normally see animals being pushed out of a herd, it's a sick or injured animal that can potentially attract the attention of predators. And in that case, I've seen with a number of different species how individuals get pushed out of that group. But when it does come to impala, they've got actually very strange dynamics. And at this time of the year, we'll start noticing that there's still mixed herds that is occurring, but at the same time I've already seen a number of males that have started setting up territories. And we've also noticed that a number of the males have moved out of the breeding herds and now started to form bachelor herds. And hopefully in the next month or so, we'll start seeing how they will start competing more and more often for territories. And then eventually by March and onwards, we'll start seeing them mating. And then some 6.5, 7 months later, we'll actually start seeing them lambing again. I just love the rutting season when it comes to impala. And they make the strangest of sounds, and it actually sounds more like a lion than it sounds like an antelope. And that's one of the adaptations which they have, is a very specialized larynx, which enables them to create these roaring-like sounds. Most of the other antelope species will either snort or whistle, or in the case of kudu, they will perform loud bark-like sounds when it comes to communicating. I just also love watching the males trying to herd females into the groups and their territories, as well as fighting off the other males that wants to come into the territories. Good morning, Alan, and welcome to the show. They're going to have to be mature individuals, probably about the vicinity of 4 to 5 years of age, when they will probably be strong enough. However, the younger and weaker individuals, they will not be able to compete with those larger males. And what we do find is that they are already reproductive here by something like 2 years of age, but it just won't happen that they mate in the case of the males. We find that with most animals is that most individuals will be in a reproductive state at a fairly young age, but in terms of males, the competition is what will prevent them. And we also see in some species that they will actually deliberately dominate and bully in the younger individuals to keep the morale low and to prevent them to go into a reproductive condition. In the meanwhile, let's go and see what Lauren is up to, as our impalas have now all moved off. Quite an interesting sighting. It's only the second time that I have actually seen this female with the horns now. And then, at least in Pridelands, that I've seen them.
No, no signs of them coming back in, I'm afraid, everyone. I am going to show you the tracks and how I know they went into Torchwood. I'm just trying to find the best tracks to actually look at. I will jump out once I get my porky pointer. You gotta love a porky pointer. Why don't more people use porky pointers? Maybe because you can never find one when you need one. And I'm also going to show you on the map exactly where they went. Okay. So, I don't know if you're really going to be able to see them in the lack of light. Little cubby track, can you get these? And they come all the way from Djuma. And then you see the bigger one, Tlalamba, and they're very messy, and this is because they ebb and flow and they move and they jump and all sorts. Here. And they go all the way up. Mummy, cubby, mummy, cubby. And this is obviously heading into Torchwood, and I just wanted to show you. I'm going to go back down and check the Mowati for that kill in the drag mark and just scratch around, but I am going to show you on the map the sort of way that they're moving and what I think has happened. So yesterday we got really lucky by finding our tracks, and because Tessa had driven that road in the morning, I know they were fresh. You could tell they were fresh as well. But she's really utilising this small section. So we found our tracks coming out of the Wattle. She's using a shortcut between dens, and it's coming here. It's that really nice shortcut that involves her going on the road all the way around. She's taken this link road. The tracks come out here, and then they go all the way to Gwaripan. It's really messy around Gwaripan, and I think that's because they were playing and she had a drink. And then she brings them out onto Cheetah Cut Line and straight onto Pipe Road. I think she's taken them to a kill, which is obviously not ideal for us, but that's okay. That is okay, they need to eat. I think that's why she went and got them. We didn't see them for a few days, no fresh tracks, because she was on what they call a bamba. And then she's bringing them over. But at least we know. I'll obviously continue to drive slowly just in case they do pop out elsewhere, but I don't think they're gonna. I heard anyone talk on the radio this morning. I wonder if it is my radio. Tony, I do mention this a fair bit, but I think it would be my experience of tracking the Namakwa chameleon in which I was learning. But that was a whole new ball game to see how different people in different areas of the world know the land and how you can really track. I mean, a chameleon, it is quite a big chameleon. It's bigger than the flatnecks, and it's endemic. It's amazing, but its feet are tiny. It has claws that are obviously not retractable, so you almost just see these little like scrape marks. And because it's sand dunes and it's just a sandy desert, there's not really much vegetation, you can just track these tiny little claw marks right across the desert. And it takes you to a tiny piece of shrubbery, not big marulas like this, just a small piece of shrubbery. And normally if you just spend time looking in that piece of vegetation, you'll find a chameleon. And they go black, they're actually really beautiful. And they look like stones and rocks, so you really have to look. Visual experience for me. They also track the geckos. Unbelievable, but because the sand is so smooth, it's a desert. Imagine walking across sand dunes, you can see the smallest little bits of movement, and you'll know that they're fresh as well, depending on the sort of amount of moisture in the air and the wind. Just amazing watching these guys do it, and every single species we went looking for, we found. It was a really, really unique experience, but it's because these local people are so in tune to their land, and that's what's special. You really need to get into tune with the landscape that you are dealing with, and obviously desert is their terrain, it is their land. Why am I not getting anyone on this radio today? Please don't tell me you're also not working. Silent. But we are just going to go back and scratch around the Mowati. I mean, we had the drag mark and it was going into Little Gowrie, but we we may as well scratch. We might get some hyena action. We might be able to see something from the boundary line. You never know. So out and hopefully we get lucky.
So I have changed my plans a little bit again. We found the tracks coming back up from Mvubu and the drainage line, back towards Quarantine, and then west. So I'm going to go and have a look at Treehouse Dam. I want to do a little bit of Philemon's Cut Line, which is this road in front of me. And just have a look, see what we can find. But I do want to stop up here in the clearing. I do want to just have a little bit of a listen. And just take in some of the scenery. Right, so I'm going to stop here. So where I am at the moment, I've got a drainage line on my right-hand side, a drainage line behind me, and the dam on my left-hand side with its own drainage line. So it's a very, very good spot for the lions to be hiding. So I just want to have a listen while we scan through the brush here. So this is probably one of the most popular roads, particularly for the predators. Because of the fire break, it's nice and open. And because it's high up on a crest surrounded by drainage lines, there's often animals here, prey species. So it's a great road for the lions and leopards to utilize in the day and the night. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to take a slow drive down that way. So just an update, everybody. The tracks have changed direction and looks like they might be coming towards the drainage line next to Quarantine, or possibly Philemon's Cut Line, which is the road I'm on at the moment. So I'm going to take a little bit of a drive down the cut line itself just now, but we're just listening at the moment in case we've heard any alarm calling or anything like that. We do have a game viewer in the area to help us, and we are all having a look to see if we can find these lines. But I'm going to keep going for now. We do want to track them as quickly as we can. And Elias and I are splitting up. So he's doing the road along the drainage line on our right, and we're going to do Philemon's Cut Line and then work back towards Treehouse Dam. So the tracks came out on Vuyatela Access, very close to Mvubu Road. Critter, yes, lions can actually go bald, and that would be from diseases like mange, for example. But it's not a common occurrence for lions to be completely bald. So if they do get ill, they can lose hair. It's one of the first places any animal will lose anything if it is in bad condition, because your hair takes quite a lot of energy to keep it shiny and soft and what's the word I'm looking for? Full of nutrition. I guess, full of strength. And so that would happen when a lion is ill. But I am seeing some lion tracks on the road here, but they do not look as fresh as the ones that we saw on Quarantine. Let me see if I can show you. So at the moment, Owen are on the right-hand track coming this way. And the reason I'm saying they're not as fresh is because I can see the tracks are lion tracks, but they're not very, very distinct. So it's as though these are tracks maybe from yesterday instead of last night or this morning. And they're coming down the road. You can see some paw prints there coming towards us. There's a nice one in the middle, another one coming down. But they're not very, very distinct tracks. So I'm thinking these might have been on their way in, and they've been moving up and down here. They're not as fresh as the tracks we had on quarantine. So I'm not going to change my plan yet based on these tracks. I'm actually going to drive all the way down to the end of the road and see if they've maybe come out there, or if there's fresher tracks that are crossing towards Treehouse Dam, which is on the left. So the tracks are coming from the right-hand side. I think they most likely have been looking for food by moving in a bit of a circle, because it's the same circle how Lauren found them yesterday, from Gowrie Dam, doing a loop and then back. I'm wondering if they're moving in a bit of a circle because it's only one young lioness that's good at hunting at this point. The other is a sub-adult male, and in fact we thought it might have been another sub-adult male yesterday, but in fact it was Purple Eye, and she was so flat that we didn't really see her. And she's also a bit old for hunting. So perhaps they're looking for some easy meals by walking through these open areas of quarantine, Philemon's Cutline, Treehouse Dam, back to Gowrie Dam. So they're doing a bit of a loop while they're looking for the rest of the lions. Joe, my favorite element of tracking is that you've got to integrate so many different skills to be able to do it properly. So it's something that requires multitasking. It requires a lot of brain power and storytelling, because you can't look at tracks and figure out where an animal's going and what it's doing unless you're telling yourself the story. And I love stories, I love storytelling. So to me, you're combining the skill of actually noticing the track and identifying it as a species. You're then adding in the knowledge that you have about that species, and on top of that you can layer in from particular individuals based on where you are and what you know. And then on top of that you're having to piece together a story. So from what I know about lions, what are their movements? Why would they be moving here? They'd be on the road so that they can avoid things in the grass. They'd be walking through an open area to look for food sources and cover distance. And I know that lions are normally moving late evening through during the night, but they should already be sleeping by now. So their tracks, I need to watch where they're cutting off. If they cut off here, okay, they're going towards the dam because lions have to drink. So if they're not cutting off here and they're cutting off there, okay, so maybe they are looking for food in the drainage line. What would they be doing right now if they were in the drainage line, and where would they go? So it's a combination of so many different skills combined with a really good set of knowledge that you have to be able to interpret what the tracks are actually doing. And that's why I'm saying I'm wondering if they're on a loop, a hunting loop at the moment. You might see Owen wiping the lens very quickly. It sounds like we might have an insect on it. Thank you, Owen. Alright, so those tracks, I'm definitely not convinced that those tracks are from today or last night. Some of them are already so indistinct in the sandier patches. Oh, elephant! That they've almost completely lost their shape. It's just a size, really. Oh yay, we've got an elephant under a marula. Perfect. I'm actually going to stop just here and then we can watch what it does. Hello, boy. This is quite a distinct looking elephant, everybody. It looks like a fairly young male, but he has lost one of his tusks. Have a look at that, he's got no tusk on this side. You can see the other tusk is there, and if you look closely you can see the raised section on his lip where the other tusk used to be, so it's actually broken just inside of the lip. So as he's walking, he's actually giving himself a bit of a dust bath. And you can see that cloud coming towards us. It also looks like he has some vegetation stuck on his back. Possibly throwing it all over himself earlier this morning. He is not looking too happy towards that drainage line. Jarhead, yes, this is quite a good tick on the list. It's always good to spend time with elephants, and we're always happy when we get to see big bulls like this. That behavior that he just showed where he shook all of the dirt off, he actually turned straight towards the drainage line and did that. I'm wondering if he can smell the lions. So he's now taking advantage of the very sandy road. And while he's walking, he sees dust bathing in between his feeding, and he's just trying to make sure that he's coated himself, getting rid of any parasites, and cooling himself off for later, because we might get some sunshine later. It might heat up. For now, though, I'm sure he's just enjoying the fact. The nice cool weather. So having one tusk means that he won't be as strong with fighting, because elephant bulls are very, very territorial. Stand by. In terms of when they are actually moving to look for females. So they don't have a territory in the sense that like the lions would have a territory. He is protective of females. He wants to be the most dominant bull, and he wants to fight with others to make sure he gets to mate. And so having two tusks definitely helps him in terms of fighting. In terms of feeding, if he's still got one tusk, he will still be able to feed and ring bark trees and things like that. But it just means he's at a disadvantage if he does come across another big bull and there's a female in estrus. He's going to be less strong because he doesn't have the second tusk to push at the other elephant with. And that's very likely how he broke the first one, because he is a very big bull. He's got a massive body. And that tusk is pretty long, considering. So you probably find he was having a fight with another bull and managed to snap that tusk. Because what happens is over time they develop almost cavities. Remember, a tusk is a modified tooth. They develop cavities, which means that the ivory and the tusk starts to crack. And then with an impact, either trying to get bark off of a tree or maybe pushing a tree over, or most commonly fighting with another bull, from the impact of their tusks kind of clashing together, it'll break along that weakened area where there's been a bit of a cavity and a crack. Oh, he is so gorgeous. He looks as though he's calmed down quite a lot again. He's just carrying on with his feeding. Certainly not showing any other behavior like he was just now towards the area of the drainage line. And it seems like we can go from big to small. It sounds like Lauren has found a very pretty little bird. Let's go have a look while I try and get closer to this Ellie again.
We actually stopped here. We're very close to the Mawati, because we could hear the crested barbet trilling and trilling and trilling, telling the world this is its territory. Bless me. But we couldn't actually see the one that was calling. Have you still got that other one? It's gone. Sorry, I don't have a monitor. It's calling, 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 and now, unfortunately, it stopped calling. And oh, there's a bird. Did you see that one? Unfortunately, it's really tricky for me to know what's going on, but it stopped calling, and I don't believe it's here anymore. It's just such an iconic call. It's such a wonderful call. You still got it. That's a barbet. I don't know if that was the one that was calling though. It's exhausting actually. You see it? So just on, as it forks, it's on the left hand side. I think it's flown away. Okay, this side turn unfortunately was not a winner. It's calling now. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's calling. My territory. I'm still here. You know, to us, birdsong is beautiful. It's a melody. It's the most wonderful thing to listen to, birdsong. Well, not all of it, but most of it. But to the birds, it's social dominance. Normally, most of the time, most calls are claiming their territory. Some calls are to attract a mate, and some calls, of course, are alarm calls. But generally speaking, they're claiming social dominance of an area. Let us move. I didn't see anything in our section of the Mowati, if that makes sense. And I didn't think I would have, because the drag mark's going into Little Gowrie. But I just wondered if there may be some hyenas lurking around, because it is right next to Twin Dams, or if we could see signs of what is going on. I'm curious. The curiosity has got me.
Good morning and welcome back to Eco Training Pridelands. So far we were focused on locating tracks from both lion as well as buffalo this morning, as we wanted to see if the lions were actually following the buffalo. However, there's not a single sign of any tracks of lions at the moment. We decided to take a quick break and look at some birds at one of the local waterholes. And in front of us there's a number of barn swallows that are sweeping fairly low down over the water to come and have a little drink. There's also a number of other bird species that are calling, and those also include common scimitar bull with its classic sweep, sweep, sweep call that it produces. We're just going to do a silent segment and allow you to listen to all the different calls in the background. Welcome back to Pridelands. We decided to take a quick little break and look at some birds at one of the water holes. There's not much going on in terms of tracks this morning, and we've been trying to follow up on both buffalo as well as on lion tracks. Meanwhile, there is a few interesting things that I did notice right over here, and that's some elephant dung. And if we actually start breaking it up, we'll start noticing that there's large amounts of marula fruits that's inside here. That's one of the ways that these fruits are actually dispersed, and it's believed that they can also possibly help in terms of assisting with the germination of the seeds. And at the same time, they're also placed inside a nutrient-rich pile of fertilizer where the seeds can start growing in and then establishing itself. If you do wonder sometimes the purposes of elephants within an ecosystem, as already mentioned, seed dispersal is one of the very important functions that they do perform. We also see that they assist with nutrient recycling as they break down large amounts of elephant dung, large amount of food particles in a single day. And average elephant bull can produce some 180 kilograms of waste product in a single day. When we do look at it, it's fairly coarse-grained, as that they don't have a very good digestive system. When it does come to some of the other functions that they perform in the ecosystem, we also see that they will create a balance between trees as well as grasses. And grasses and trees are both equally important to support a wide range of different herbivores. Some species are totally dependent on grasses, while others are totally dependent on the leaf material to feed on that. And then we also get those in-betweeners, such as impalas, which is mixed feeders that will eat both on leaf as well as grass material. We also find that by opening up areas, elephants will have a food resource for themselves in the summer month when they prefer to eat. The majority of the time they'll focus on grasses, and in winter we see that they will switch over to feeding the majority of the time on leaf material and a wide range of other plant parts, which includes anything from roots, shoots, flowers and seeds that they will feed on, and even the inner bark, which is responsible for the transportation of nutrients and minerals. We find by maintaining the balance, they also will allow that there's a good number of species diversity of both grazers as well as browsers in that area. And if you do find that elephants become too successful in an area, they might outcompete all the plants and only turn that area into a grassland, and then you tend to start seeing that you will lose your browsers in that area. While we look at what we can go and find, let's go and see what Lauren is up to.
Dungalicious. Gotta love a piece of dung. Now the kill's been found, so that drag mark was the kill. It's suspected to be Mareeb's, but again, is it? You probably shouldn't speculate, but he was in the area last night, and it's just on the little Gowrie side. But no leopard, just a carcass. I don't know what the carcass is yet, but we'll get there. We shall get there. Hello, ladies. How are we this morning? I know it's a bit cold and overcast. I feel the same. We've spotted quite a few newborns now. It's very exciting that the sort of late dropping. Although the entire breeding season is synchronous, it's synchronized between the females, it doesn't mean that they're all going to sort of work. There will be late mating, late estrus cycles. The estrus cycle is a natural thing for a female, and it's not always going to happen bang on time. I love the impalas. Okay, I'm just deciding what to do, because to be honest, Mareeb's could be lurking. So there's just a road here that I know Tandy and Mareeb's loves. I've had them quite a few times on here. That's on our side that I'm just going to check. Just in case he's moved off from the carcass just to have a sleep. Rest and digest. But because there are two impala here, that's sort of suggesting to me that he's not going to be here. Frog. So I just want to check, but the presence of the impala there is suggesting to me immediately that he's not going to be here. But don't actually know if it is Marie's, we're just guessing. But that drag mark, very cool. And I think it's in the Jackalberry. I don't know if you remember, not so long ago we had Tandy on Little Gowrie and we got permission to go in, and she killed a duiker right in front of us and she took it up this huge iconic Jackalberry. It's in there. We've also had Sabui, Shasha and Langa in that same Jackalberry. All of these leopards end up using these same iconic trees, the big ones with the big branches, marulas, Jackalberries.
Standing by. Yeah, I'm standing by. Go ahead. Triple M and then I'll come back and I'll catch patch. Yeah, I'm standing by at the moment.
This is just a little secret spot that we've had Tandy quite a few times. And it's very normal for leopards to hoist, as you know, and then take breaks from it. Stretch. You could also be resting on a Little Gowrie side, of course. Kendra, you're saying someone out from behind those bushes. I know, it's been very quiet on the spot front, I must say. There's lots of line activity around. It could be that. It could be a number of things. I would really love to see. I'm going to try and work some magic and see if we can maybe go in and check it. Back to that good old magic topic. Those who don't believe in it will never find it. You gotta keep believing and then you'll find it. Well, I'm not a big lover of flies landing on my face, especially the topic that I went into great detail yesterday about how flies eat and how they actually digest their food. Not on my face, not on my face. Okay, well at least we know there's a kill there, and that's what's involved in the morning. The fact that there's a boundary line sort of prevented us from following up, but at least we're getting there. We're slowly getting there to solving the mystery. We know that Kalamba didn't cross back in. And that's what Sunrise Safari is all about, ticking off. You have a list, okay, Kalamba's not crossed back in, Hyena Den's not active, and you can slowly put the pieces together, and I absolutely love it. So I'm going to try and see what I can do here, and hopefully by the end of drive, we're going to have a leopard.
Okay, so I have changed my plan again. It seems like the tracks are going towards the boundary. So what I've done is I've come down to Gowrie Main. I'm about to turn on to Triple M so that I can go up the western boundary, and I just want to check there in case there are any fresh tracks. We have seen a few impalas that were looking fairly alert, but not to the point where I think there are lions right here. And as I say that, I found tracks. I just want to have a look at these quickly. Oh, they're not that fresh. Never mind. Maybe from the Nkuhumas when they were the 3 lionesses with the 7 little ones coming back to fetch the other one. A nice soft sand next to Gowrie Main. So what we've been doing every now and then is just stopping and having a bit of a listen. And so far, we have not heard any alarm calling or anything like that. So I do want to just cover a little bit of distance and get a little bit further north now that I'm on Triple M before I stop again and listen. But I am seeing some buffalo tracks. So that's a pretty good thing, because the lions might be following that. Whether it's the Talamatis or the Nkuhumas, there's a good chance that they'll be following buffaloes. So what we're looking for is flicking tails, flicking ears, and animals staring. It is actually quite a nice cool morning. I haven't needed to take my jacket off yet, which is quite strange for January. Normally by this time we're getting very, very hot, and so this is actually good news because it means that the lions might not be flat sleeping, they might actually still be moving, which is maybe why we're a little bit further behind on where they're going. And we might still be trying to play catch up a little bit on the boundary here. So I haven't seen any tracks on the western boundary yet. Just to give an update, it is a coffee kind of morning. It's the kind of morning where it is a lot cooler than expected. So I do think we have some rain coming, but I am hoping that will mean that the lions are still moving. I don't know if that was a termite mound or if that was an animal. Always good to check. So it seems like the tracks are coming more from the drainage line towards where we are at the moment. Oh, it's an elephant, but it is so well hidden. I don't even know if we'll get a view of that. Oh, it is moving. Let's try it. It's the back of an elephant, and I'm just seeing a bit of white tusk as it's moving. I'm hoping it's coming towards the road. And we've basically just changed our plan a little bit, which I'm quite happy about if there's an elephant here. We're now going to be checking Triple M because it seems like... Oh, I can hear the elephant feeding. It seems like possibly the tracks are coming towards the western boundary. So have a listen, you can hear this elephant feeding. So this is actually one of those perfect moments where we can't see it very well, so instead of trying to look through the brush, feel free to close your eyes and listen instead to the sounds of the elephant moving and feeding through the brush here. It's actually going to cross the road. But this is one of the noisier elephants I've spent time with in the last while. There are actually two, I think. Possibly three. This is our herd that has the small baby, I think. Indigo Girl, an elephant's foot is actually very similarly structured to ours. So you can see it looks quite, I want to say chubby at the bottom. It's quite plump at the bottom. But they're actually walking on their toes. So very similar to ours, you're not actually seeing an ankle above the foot, you're actually seeing the heel. The whole bottom part that's touching the ground is basically a lot of fatty tissue and some cartilage. But if you have a look, the little section you can see at the bottom that looks as though it might be an ankle is actually the heel. The only part of the elephant's bones that are actually touching towards the ground are the toes. We have got another one coming out as well. It looks like we've got a family of elephants here. So to give you an idea, elephants walk on their tiptoes all the time. The bottom is all of this fatty tissue so that it can absorb the weight of the elephant. And it allows them to walk very quietly. There are actually more elephants around. I can hear some more movement. That's not these three. But this is very likely a small family of mother with older calf, younger calf, and she's pregnant again. I just want to watch them walk off, and then I'll finish the question on the structure of the foot so that I can try and give you a better description using my hand. Absolutely gorgeous. I think they're definitely taking advantage of the cooler weather today. So as much as they were being quite noisy coming out, that is quite unusual for elephants. That's because their feet are so nicely cushioned that you don't normally hear an elephant moving. What we were actually hearing was the branches moving as they were feeding, not actually the footsteps through the grass. Okay, there we go. They have moved off. We have got another vehicle, I think, coming up somewhere. I can hear one. But they're moving a little bit. Let me see if I can reposition. And while I'm doing that, let me finish answering the question. So instead of an elephant walking flat, okay, so they've got the same basic structure as us with the same big bone structure with two bones coming from the elbow to the wrist or from the knee to the ankle, and then metatarsals, metacarpals, those kinds of joints in the palm, and then toes, which are kind of right at the front. Before we focus back on the elephants, they don't walk flat. They walk on their tiptoes, so they're angled up like this. So the part that we're seeing that we think is an ankle is actually the heel of the foot that's high up with a lot of fatty tissue underneath, and then higher up on the leg is the ankle joint. Let me just move out of the way for these vehicles. We've got two vehicles coming in here. So I just want to move off the road so that they can get past if they need to. There we go. And so an elephant's foot is actually very, very, very similar to what we would have as a foot, just walking constantly on tippy toes. If you think about it, most of the mammals have the same basic bone structure as humans. So it would be a heel or a palm, or the back of your hand down to your fingers and your toes, except that they are concentrated on walking on the tiptoes instead of on the ball or the flat of the foot. But the same basic bone structure, and certainly quite standard in terms of mammals. The same bone structure as lions, the same as most of the mammals. It is absolutely stunning to see this little family out and about this morning, especially with the weather the way it is. They're not going to have to be hiding from other animals, and they're not going to have to be hiding from the heat. They can just carry on feeding through the brush and really just enjoying their morning breakfast. So it looks like we've got 4 elephants here. There is still another one on the other side of the road as well. It's going to cross soon. But let's just have a listen to those sounds. So we are hearing mostly the sounds of these elephants breaking branches out of the trees. It actually looks like it's a false marula that they're feeding on. They are trying their best to get as much of that greenery off as possible before they move off. I wouldn't be surprised if they're heading slowly towards Treehouse Dam. They are going in that direction. They also might come out somewhere on Gowrie Main. A whole family together. She's got a leaf stuck on the top of her head. You can see it as she turns her head like that. And that's actually just from breaking the branches. It's not that she actively put it there or was throwing the vegetation around. She was breaking branches. One of the leaves must have fallen off and landed on her head. quite an old female. It's such a lovely sound as they're breaking that vegetation off. So it almost looks like this has been pushed over before. The tree's actually angled towards us. And so they're actually just enjoying the fact that they can get to the greenery that would normally be very high up in the tree. So it seems as though maybe this is a tree that they've knocked over before. Not necessarily these particular elephants, but definitely knocked over by elephants at some point. Just at the moment she's using her trunk as a tool with fingertips on the front. So they've got two little on the front where they can pick up something as small as a peanut. Sorry, Mel, I'm not getting your comms so clearly. I know there was a question there. If you could please send it through again. We seem to be in a bit of a bad signal spot. JD, absolutely yes, elephants would be able to stay in one area if the food and water was unlimited. They wouldn't have to move, but the reason elephants have to move so much is because they're constantly going to be looking for... What did you smell, girl? They're constantly going to be looking for new food and new water sources to keep them going. They have to eat so much during the day to keep those bodies going that they really do have to... Hello, little one. They have to keep moving and feeding. I've got a whole family with me here. I wonder what made her look up like that. I don't know what she smelled and what she heard. She decided to move out of the thicket and towards the open area. You probably find maybe she's caught a whiff of the lions because there have been lions moving so much in the last few days along the boundaries. Maybe something just made her a bit uncomfortable and she wanted to come into the open. But at this distance, what you can see really nicely is all of the hairs on her bottom lip as she's putting the grass in. You can really see those hairs nicely. It's a bit of a beard or a moustache. A bit of both, actually. Hello, little one. It's probably one of my favorite things about elephants is as they brush past each other, their skin is so thick that it makes quite a rough sound as they're rubbing past each other. But what a lovely way to spend the morning with a little elephant family.
We're just sitting by a dam. A dam that doesn't normally have a hippo, or not always, but at least there's a hippo today. It's a tricky morning, windy, overcast. The sun wants to pop out, but it is just not doing so. However, we are going to sit for a while. The birds are starting to call and just enjoy this moment by the dam. is so lovely. Sometimes it's nice to just stop, look, and listen.
Okay, so I've left my little elephant family. They've moved off back into the thickets. I must have been in a little bit of a black hole there. I wasn't getting any radio communications from the game drive radio, and it seems like we were just in a bit of a bad signal patch. But we are back on our way. We are on Triple M going north, and what I want to do is just go and check towards Sandy Patch from Impala Plains, do that stretch, and then back towards Quarantine. I'm not sure if the lions have crossed out yet or not. We haven't seen any tracks, but it is quite likely that if this is the way they were coming, they might have cut straight across and crossed west over Triple M. But it's always fun having a search for lions, or any cats actually. Jeremy and Rafa, the thickest skin and coat in the bush is definitely an elephant. If you're looking at skin in particular, it's a good few centimeters thick. It's very, very thick. Hippos also have quite thick skin, and so do rhinos. If you're looking at an actual coat and the density of the hair, I would say maybe something like a waterbuck or a leopard or a hyena. They've all got very, very thick hair. But I think they're all much of a muchness in terms of hair, except for things like elephants, which have very few hairs left, and hippos and rhinos, things like that, that have the much thicker skin. They'll concentrate less on the hair and more on the skin for protection. And that's not just protection from being eaten, that's protection from the elements, because they've got a larger, very dark body. They've got to have protection from the temperature in particular. So I would concentrate more on the skin than on the hairs, because as much as the hairs are important, they're all much of a muchness when we're looking at things, whether it's, you know, something small like a dwarf mongoose right the way up to something big like a lion. They've all got probably about the same hair. Okay, let's have a look for some tracks. We haven't seen as many of the smaller birds today as I would expected, other than some of those ground scraper thrushes, things like that, and our Egyptian goose family, blacksmith lapwings. We have been hearing quite a lot of birds, a lot of woodland kingfishers, some cuckoos, which I love. But in terms of some of the other species we normally see, rollers, things like that, we haven't actually seen that many. Some old line tracks here, but I think again from the Talamatis, possibly when they were up on the termite mound and moving along the boundary. Owen and I have very, very good luck for lions on the boundary. Yes, let's check that clearing, that's a good idea. Okay, I'm going to keep checking towards Sandy Patch and do a little bit of that area, hoping that we might pick up on some more lion tracks. But in the meantime, why don't we head over to Lauren with her hippos in a waterhole.
Kat and I were just saying it's one of those days. It's just one of those days. Nothing's going right. But we do have a hippo in Twin Dams. But hippos actually have very, very thin skin. And not thick skin, believe it or not. Not like a rhino or an elephant. It's actually, in terms of the epidermis, it's very, very thin. There's a substantial subcutaneous layer of fat there. But then it's mostly muscle mass. Their skin is really, really thin. And it's a sort of optical illusion when you look at hippos. You think, they're going to have incredibly thick skin, and it looks that way, but it's actually not. And that is why they spend a lot of time in water, or one of the reasons. And that is why they secrete their own hipposudoric acid. It's very, very thin. Chunky layer of fat, like us all. and then pure muscle underneath. If you ever Google, I'm not allowed to show you my phone, but if you Google hippo muscle structure or their sort of anatomy, it's phenomenal. They're extremely powerful animals, but the skin itself is actually really thin. We went back to the hyena den, still not active. I feel like I got out of bed on the wrong side, you know, but that's not even possible. There actually is only one side of my bed I can get out of, but you know what I'm saying. Oh, it's just been one of those mornings, but we are just going to continue to scratch a little bit more for potentially Mareebs or the owner of the carcass. It's just amazing spotting a drag mark like that. My eagle-eyed cameraman actually spotted it. But it could be a number of things that actually make that. Sometimes elephants drag sticks that sometimes from a distance can look like a drag mark. Sometimes monitor lizards, so you've got to actually get out and have a look at it and see, are there tracks around? Is somebody dragging something? Or is it just something that slithered across the roads? But we saw the leopard tracks. But unfortunately, they were just pointing in the direction we didn't want them to. And there's not always a hippo in twin dams, by the way, so they move. They move water bodies. So this guy's clearly thinking, oh, twin dams. I like it. But the twin of twin dams, Lauren's favorite pan, is actually really good for birding. Not the weavers this year, I'm afraid. I don't know, I'm feeling that I know the weavers are later than last year. And not last year as in 2021, but the summer before. Because I remember having them on Christmas last year. I did the Christmas stint. So they're not here, they're not back at the pan. And I also feel the insect life. I mean, we're at 25th of January, my goodness. Eek. Where's this month gone? I also feel the insect life is just not booming in terms of diversity and abundance like it was last January. I feel it's also very cold. You agree, right? Kat agrees, because obviously he's spent a lot more time in South Africa than I have. It's a chilly, chilly summer. We've not had as much rainfall as last year. What's happening? Is it climate change or is it just a fluctuation? Natural fluctuation in terms of weather patterns? I do not know. But I definitely feel the weavers should be back. They're a month late if it's the 25th of January. And the insect life. I mean, yes, there are insects, but it's not... Do you agree with me about the insects? Yes, he does. They should be in your face. Every second you should be dodging insects, swarming, fluttering, scuttling, buzzing, humming, and it just is not the case. Interesting. I can actually see a woodland kingfisher. Let's move over and see if we can catch them, because this pan is normally really good for birds. Nora, I don't actually know what you mean. Oh, has he flown away? Ripples on the top of water just from wind. It's just wind movement. I think he's... Oh no! 10 o'clock, can you see him? Just a splash of blue. I think that's the woodland. It's literally just movement from wind on the surface of the water, just like if you were in the bath and you blew on it. I'm not aware of different ripples having different names because it literally just is air. So if you blow hard, it ripples. The ripples are closer together and maybe even create a little wave action. Currents have names, wave pattern have names, but ripples on the surface are nothing more than just air movement. On a windy day, you're going to have a lot more than you would on a non-windy day. Hope that answers your question. Romeo, I really don't know. I think I just did go quite deep into it. I don't know if it's climatic effects, natural fluctuations in climate, because you'll always find annually there are sort of cycles. I mean, in the Maldives, we used to experience the after effects of an El Nino or an El Nina. They work in a cycle action. You get the El Nino and then a few years later an El Nina. And that's just a normal part of the world. Yes, they are increasing in frequency and intensity, but generally speaking, it's a normal cycle. Whereas I don't have the answers, and it is probably just my personal projections that I'm putting out here. But I know that this tree at the weaver pan was full of weavers on Christmas 2020. 100%. So where are they? Are they just no longer utilizing the tree? I mean, I've seen a handful of weavers here and that's it. I'm really not seeing that many weavers. And I'm also aware that last January 2021, insect life was just buzzing in terms of the butterfly diversity. I had to look at my list, moth diversity, just all the insects that we were seeing. And yes, there are some around, but for example, I've not seen one single bushveld antlion. The praying mantis diversity is almost at zero. Not seen a single stick insect, which we were seeing a lot. Hardly any moths. We used to see the big owl moths.
Dung beetles.
Yeah, dung beetles, exactly. I mean, yes, they are around, but not in the numbers that they normally are. I mean, you literally had to avoid driving over dung piles. They would be crawling with dung beetles. And if you think of yesterday morning, if any of you were watching the drive, I got out and I lay next to a big pile of dung because that's just what we do. In the past, last year, that would have been swarming with dung beetles. Where are they? I've seen a handful of dung beetles, a handful of rhino beetles. There's really not that diversity. The grasshoppers, the elegants are here, yes, but not in high numbers. And what about all the other species that we see? Rainbow shield bugs. Goodness, they used to be everywhere. Millipedes are everywhere, I'll grant that. The shongololos are. But where is everything else? I really don't know. I could not possibly make a conclusive statement, but I do feel that this summer is particularly cold. Really cold. This is my 4th summer in South Africa. And I've not had one as cold as this. So is it just a natural cycle? Maybe every X amount of years they have a colder summer? Is it some other natural effect that we can't see that's causing these effects, if you like, a domino effect along the line? I don't know. But I do feel that by the 25th of January, this environment is much different than it was last year and the year before that. And it's on the back of a number of lush summers as well. Anyway, we are going to sit here and make a plan on what to do next.
Welcome to Running Islands. We're experiencing a very quiet moment in the morning so far. And we decided that we're going to check one of our other dams out. We just arrived at Ndovo Dam. And there's some Vilibius that's making their way in for a drink. We also noticed that there's a number of impala with the young that is very playful this morning. I hope they're all going to come closer. In the meanwhile, we're going to do a short silent segment and just share the surrounding area and the animals that's coming to drink with you.
So I've been looking all morning to try and find some flowers and some insects. And I know Lauren was talking about how we haven't had as many insects this year. But interestingly enough, I've also been very surprised by how few flowers we've been seeing. And up on Sandy Patch, I've managed to finally found a group of different flowers together. And these beautiful yellow ones are called wild hibiscus. And these actually relate very strongly to insects. You can see it's a beautiful big yellow flower. In the middle is a bit of a reddish black section with a yellow pollen right in the center. And I think because of the weather today, most of the flowers have been pretty closed. So this is not open to its full glory at the moment. It's kind of half open because there's not much sunlight. But this particular species is actually a very important host plant for a lot of hawk moth species. And hawk moths are quite unusual looking and one of the more common insects we're used to seeing. And I haven't seen any since I've been back. So it is quite a relief to see a few hibiscus species around here. We have also noticed that there are some other flowers. We've got a bit of wild foxglove, St. Bernard's lily, a few different species. And that one in particular, that's the wild foxglove, is one of my absolute favorites. And another one that is so important for insects. It's shaped like a little bit of a bell. It's a beautiful light purple lilac-y color. And the flowers are actually pointed downwards. So above it you can see quite a few different buds. And those buds are going to turn into this beautiful purple tip where you'll have one flower on top of the other all the way up to the top of this plant. And it's actually quite an important species for soil. It anchors the soil very nicely. But for insects in particular, those flowers, because of the shape, they've got nectar right at the top end of the flower. So things like bees and beetles have to come in from the bottom of the flower and climb all the way to the top to try and get some of that nectar. So this is one of those good species for a lot of the smaller flying insects. And actually that's how they're pollinated, believe it or not. Bees have a little bit of fluffy surface on their bodies, and as the bee's climbing in right to the back of the flower, the fluffy part of the bee catches on the pollen of this plant. And then as it moves from one flower to another, the little fluffy bits that are capturing the pollen will then distribute it on the next plant as it's climbing into that tube chamber. And this has always been one of my favorites, I think because it looks so different. There is a pink variety as well, which looks very similar, but the flower is bright pink and it's got a more open tube at the bottom. And that's actually a wild sesame, but I haven't seen any of it today. I think they're all closed. So at least we are seeing a few flowers. There's a few St. Bernard's lilies as well, which is an unusual variant of lily that you get. It doesn't look like it there. You can see a bit of the white. It's a very, very fine plant with little white lilies right at the top. And it looks like grass, actually. You would very easily confuse it for grass if you weren't seeing the flowers. But another really good food source for a lot of the insects. So I'm very happy that at least somewhere today we have found some beautiful flowers that are starting to bloom. Cody, yes, I'm sure you could be able to eat wild sesame. It's actually one of the plants that has a few traditional uses. So I believe it's actually added to milk, if I'm not mistaken, and used as an aphrodisiac in men. But I don't know if it actually works. I think it's just a bit of an old wives' tale or a traditional belief. But yes, you can. It is safe. There's a lot of the wild flowers and wild plants out here that we can eat. But there are definitely some you want to avoid, particularly things like tamboti, or even there's beautiful small purple flowers called a poison apple, which luckily it's in the name. But if you look at it, it's got quite a nice little fruit that looks almost like a tomato. But they are actually very, very poisonous. So you've got to know what you can and can't eat out here. I've never ever tried eating a wild sesame. I much prefer fruits, so I would stick to things like marulas and maybe sour plums, num-nums, those kinds of things. I wouldn't necessarily chance it with some of the flowers. Especially if you don't know what you're looking at, you don't want to make a mistake out here. A general rule of thumb is if you are ever lost in the bush and you don't know what to eat, don't follow baboons and eat what they eat. They are able to digest poisonous things. Rather follow monkeys. Oh, is there a butterfly? Oh, it's a leaf. It looked like a butterfly in the light. But yes, rather follow monkeys. Monkeys have a very similar palate to us and they can't ingest poisonous things. So they will know what you can and can't eat. And a good rule of thumb is to follow them. But I'm just so happy that we've got birds calling. We've got a few flowers blowing in the breeze that's picked up. And I think we've been looking for that and craving it this morning because of the weather. Most of the flowers have been closed. So it's a nice little pop of color. And the hibiscus in particular is probably the first thing people notice. Very similar shape to a wild morning glory, which is purple and tubular, but that's much lower to the ground. Even smaller things like devil's thorn, we've been seeing the greenery, but not the flowers this morning. I think everybody is hiding a bit. So flowers will normally turn towards the sun and open, and because we've got such a thick cloud bank coming in, it just hasn't really been a good day for flowers or insects today. I don't think I've actually seen a single butterfly fly over today. It's a bit too windy as well. Okay, so the next time you come over to Rusty, you actually won't be seeing me, everybody. We have got Liam, who's going to be doing his interview for the next hour, so wish him luck, give him a warm welcome when you see him, and I will see you all this afternoon, but I'm excited to see what we can find with Liam for you for the rest of the morning. While we do a little bit of a swap over.
Polly gave us permission just to come in and have a look. We are about 15 meters from Galway Main, but due to the thick trees, we're not actually able to see this. And a big thank you to Polly. It's definitely impala, but I think get my binos. I think it's a young impala. I think it's very tricky to see, and we still have no clue to who the culprit is. It's so thick in the Mulwati. It is just the Mulwati, it's just on the southern side. And this jackalberry had Tandy in here. This is actually the jackalberry where Tandy had a kill, the one I described earlier. Then she called Mareebs when he was much younger. He came, and then Tlalamba appeared. I had Sergio on drive, one of my Ticket to Dream guests, and we could hear all this commotion happening. And I think a few people got wonderful photos that are on social media of Tlalamba and Mareebs tumbling out of this tree. This is the exact tree. It's a beautiful jackalberry, and I've also had Sabui, Shasha and Langa when they were much younger in this tree. So it's quite iconic. It's a perfect hoisting tree, and naturally we just don't know who the leopard is. But luckily Polly just let us come and check. The kill happened on Juma, isn't that fascinating? And it was dragged all this way, and it just really amazes me how they all utilize the same areas and the same trees. Time and time again. But sadly no luck, but we might be able to pop in this afternoon and see if there is may be able to get a view of who it is. Tessa was hot on the heels of Mareebs last night, so I would guess him. He's a likely candidate. But he could be sleeping anywhere in the thicket here, really, it's so thick. Conrad, I love it. I love puzzles. I love murder mysteries. When I was a child, Cluedo was my favorite board game. Oh, it was always Professor Plum. And I still love Cluedo to this day. But when I was a younger child, you used to be able to buy these packs. Now, for the life of me, I cannot remember the name, but it contained clues. It contained x-rays and burnt pieces of paper and broken items and all sorts of clues and faxes, recordings of X, Y, and Z, and you had to follow the steps with all of these clues and almost like a mini CSI for kids and put together what had happened and who murdered who. And I was absolutely obsessed with them. Obsessed. I love puzzles. And out here in the bush, I guess everything's a puzzle. You know, talking about why the insects are not here. And Joy, I saw that you commented on the rains in Cape Town, and that's interesting to hear it from your perspective, because obviously that's in a different part of the country, and you're also noticing that it just feels like a slightly odd summer. Another puzzle. I love, love, love puzzles. But we will pull out now. I mean, there's only so much staring at a carcass one can do. And maybe, just maybe later, we might have a leopard on there. Hopefully it's Mareebs, because I haven't seen that boy in a while now. Safari Kitty, lovely to hear from you. Well, to be honest, Tlalamba left quite a substantial bit of a carcass on that big jackalberry, the iconic jackalberry of Gowrie Cutline. Some of you all know the one I'm talking about. And it hung there for ages and ages, and naturally it started to wear away, biodegrade its flesh. And all that was sort of skin moves, and it was there for such a long time. Every time we eventually, due to wind and just breaking down off the skin, although it takes longer, eventually after a little while, sorry, the signal's gone a bit tricky, we'll just give you a last view of that jackalberry. It just breaks, falls to the ground, and then of course either hyenas will come along or it'll just biodegrade. Organic material go back into the soil, which is a good thing for the soil. All of those nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and the cycle of life begins. But empty carcasses can stay in the tree for quite a while. But if there's lots of meat on it and it's visible from the air, like Mulwati's warthog was, you will find tawnies and battaliers coming to sit on the tree and peck away at it. Okay, we are going to leave this area now as there is no sign of our leopard. We are just sitting in the Mowati admiring the drainage line. The buzz of the day is really starting. We were hoping to find a leopard, but no such luck. So we are just going to sit here for a moment or two and listen to the sounds around us. Isn't it so lovely? My favorite place to be in this reserve is in the dry riverbed.
Good morning again from a slightly cloudy Djuma Private Game Reserve. My name is Liam. I'm a bit of a strange face here on drive this morning. A special thanks to Tess, who's stepped out of the driver's seat of Rusty here to hand over the reins to me for about the next 45 minutes or so for a bit of an interview drive. So we're going to carry on down the access road here and see if we can find any more sign of those lions and potentially try and cross paths with possibly some elephant and who knows, we'll see what we can see. All right.
Okay.
So a bit of a cloudy morning here at Djuma. Thanks very much for the welcome, Grant. Fingers crossed indeed. As I mentioned, a bit of a cloudy morning here at Djuma. Cloudy weather is brilliant for predator activity. On the normal sort of hot summer's days that you'd expect in this kind of Limpopo, Hoedspruit type area. Temperatures getting up to mid-40s, no lion activity at all. But as I say, mid-20s this morning, prime activity time for lions, leopards, that sort of thing. So yeah, let's see what we can see. Thank you very much, viewers. Extremely good to be here. Yeah, a pretty smashing part of the world. I've spent much of my time over the last 10 years or so working as a field guide in the Sabi Sand area, the area where Djuma is located. And I can confirm this is an extremely, extremely special place to be. Very hard to beat the game viewing out here. Not much sign of these line tracks as of yet. Yeah, very, very possible that they could have cut through a block, taken a slightly different turn. But we'll keep looking. You never know, maybe we get lucky somewhere along the way. The skill to having a good time in the bush is, I think, in my perspective, not getting too hung up on pursuing big stuff all the time, but trying to make the most of the small stuff along the way as well. As Tess mentioned before we kind of cut away, spending a bit of time on wildflowers, insects, all of that sort of thing. Control, I'm sorry, I was a bit carried away there. Would you mind repeating that last question? I think I missed it. Eliza, thank you very much for your question. In terms of tracking, for me, I like the open-endedness of it. It builds a bit of anticipation, and it's kind of like a lottery. Sometimes you have great success. Sometimes you go on a bit of a goose chase and nothing really materializes. You really just never know what you're going to get. And that's brilliant. It all adds to the adventure. Nothing out here is a guarantee. It's a roll of the dice. So we're going to continue through this lovely block of silver cluster leaves, see what we can kind of pick out of the vegetation. In a minute or two we're going to be linking to Lauren, who's bumbling in a slightly different area of the concession.
We have obviously left the kill site and we're just going to check Treehouse Dam. I don't think Tessa checked Treehouse Dam this morning. My radio's completely down, I'm not sure why. But Treehouse Dam is a good dam to check, so we're on our way there just to have a look. And see what else the morning can bring. It's been a frustrating morning for some reason. Lots of promise. But you literally never know what's around the corner, and I really mean that. Spiderwebs are most likely going to be around the next corner, but you never know. You never know what you're going to see or smell or even hear. You're giving me nightmares here. Not quite my mouth. Thank goodness for that. But yes, I did have a bit of a hairy one. That's another thing I forgot to mention earlier. No golden orbs. Okay, I've seen the bandied golden orb, the small ones with the bands around their legs. I've seen two. But I mean, normally you see just these strings of golden webs everywhere. Last year there was a lot. Where are they? Are they late? It's just hyena. Sorry, I just see tracks and I just thought I better look. Are they late or are they just not arriving? But one day I was driving through Texans Road to go to the hyena den, and golden orb web spiders can really construct these webs fast. They're strong, they're huge, but they can do it fast. And I was driving and talking to the camera as usual, live, and just at last minute, I don't see the spider, but I see the golden yellow hue of that web, and I stop inches away from my face, and lo and behold, the golden orb was right here. I don't want to break a spider's web. That makes me feel really bad. They put a lot of effort and energy into that. They have to pull the silk out from their spinnerets with all of the wonderful arms they have, or legs, and weave a web. That's incredible. So I didn't break that web. We reversed immediately. I'm sure some of you will remember it, but the golden orb was right here. I love them, but I don't want one in my face. Never mind my mouth, Corolla. Oh, dear, dear. But I remember I reversed out of that sighting and we did a segment on the golden orb herself. And moments later, an elephant came through and broke the web. She'll just hang, she'll swing. They're experts at that. It's a technique called bridging. They're used to their webs being broken. What they don't want to happen is to be on the ground. Their bodies are not really equipped for walking. They can walk, but that's not what the bodies are specialized for. The bodies are specialized from hanging. So just like Tarzan would swing from one tree to another, that's what they do. Whee! And then they start again. They build their web again. And they can change the hue of the silk. So sometimes you'll find it's really, really yellow. That's sort of sickly yellow, and then sometimes it's just a gorgeous golden that glints in the sun, and they can actually control via pigment the hue of the silk. But where are they? I was really hoping to see lots of them. They're such wonderful creatures. They're just not in my mouth. That was a question. I remember Brent one time found an exoskeleton of the golden orb web spider. So it wasn't actually a spider, and put it on his face. I'll never forget that. It was just the exoskeleton. The mold. Okay, Treehouse Dam. What you gonna have for us here? Nothing. Jolly good. Jolly good. But we are just going to sit here for a moment and properly look and see if anything comes by. We're sitting at Treehouse Dam now. It actually looks like a love heart. You see it? Yes. Not much is happening, I'm afraid, but still, we're just going to sit here for a moment or two. Sometimes you can just see movement in the thicket, or you can end up hearing something. Driving past the dam too quickly is not a good idea. We're just going to sit here and listen. Isn't it so peaceful here? We're going to continue to sit here just a little bit longer.
Welcome back to Eco Trading Pridelands. We went to go and position ourselves at Ndlovu Dam to see what we can go and find there. As it's slowly heating up, we actually in the hope that we have some more animals coming in for a drink, as we've been experiencing a pretty quiet morning out there on drive. Some of the animals that are sneaking closer, there's some impalas as well as a territorial wildebeest, which is making his way over here. You can just see him swaying his tail there from side to side in the distance, and the aims of keeping the flies away from his backside. Quite often we will also notice that zebras will actually use their tails in a very similar fashion, and they often will stand head to tail and helping one another to actually also keep flies away from one another's faces. We're just going to sit and watch and see what happens, and if there's any of the viewers that has any questions, that will be of great help for us at the moment. You're more than welcome to ask us any nature-related questions, or if there's anything specific that you would like to know about the guiding industry or how to get into the guiding industry, you're more than welcome to give us a shout. Good morning, Benji, and welcome to the show. I honestly don't know how to answer you even on that question. There's a number of them that has got incredibly hard armor, and I probably would reckon it's possibly one of the tuk-tukis, if I had to take a guess. And if we look at the exoskeleton of insects, it actually consists of a substance called chitin, and they also often reckon that it's stronger than steel, than the same equivalent in terms of thickness. Sorry, that was a fly that we had to unfortunately spit out there. There's a lot of biting flies out here, and I often feel for the animals and for Darby and myself at the moment as well. They're quite pestering us at the moment, and one of the fly species that did go and bite Darby this morning is known as a louse fly, and even they've got tough leathery exoskeleton. That's very, very difficult to get rid of them once they're actually on you, and they've got very special little feet. It's like tiny little hooks, which makes it even more difficult to pull them off you. And meanwhile, let's go and meet Liam, who's busy with the interview drive. Best of luck, Liam.
Alrighty, so coming down a nice cut line. No more luck with those line tracks this morning, unfortunately. Quite a bit of fresh sign for elephant. I think with the glutton of marula fruit available at the moment, elephants seem to be quite widespread around the property. So we may cross paths with a little breeding herd or a lone bull or two in the next short while. But yeah, let's see how it goes. Elephant are my absolute favorite of all of the variety of species that we deal with. Victoria, great question. I was very fortunate to be born into a bush environment with a family that was based out in a wilderness. So yeah, basically from as old as I could stand and pick things up, I was carrying geckos and baby birds and tortoises and that sort of thing into the house. and it only got worse from there. It started as a curiosity as I was a very, very small child, and it's developed into a bit of an obsession, if I'm to be quite honest. I absolutely love it. And what a pleasure to be here sharing that passion with you today. As Tess mentioned a little bit earlier on in the drives, these cutlines can be very productive areas for spotting wildlife. They offer a nice variety of landscape. Because they have been trimmed by man, you've kind of got quite an open space of grass with kind of dense woodland on either side. Great for antelope that might want to come out of thickets to improve their chances of spotting a predator. And thusly also great for predators to come out of thickets to try and spot antelope. Okay, Mingo, that's a very good question. In terms of herbivores that don't like to graze together, I would think something like a black rhino. They are very, very solitary browsers. Occasionally seen together, but in all of my experience viewing them over the last 10 years or so, I don't think I've ever viewed them feeding alongside anything else. They tend to be quite secretive. They'll avoid pretty much all other animals. Great question, thank you. Another brilliant question. I've been fortunate over the last 10 years to spend quite an enormous amount of time with prides of lions across the kind of repertoire of lodges that I've worked at. Difficult to put my finger on a single sighting as a favorite. I've been fortunate on possibly 2 or 3 occasions to see lionesses move extremely small cubs for the first time. That's always really special. I've also been lucky enough to witness lions hunting on a number of occasions. Not always for the faint of heart. Obviously, to watch an animal lose its life as a food source to something like a lion can be quite a shocker. Some people get very, very upset, but we've got to understand that something has got to make that ultimate sacrifice to give itself as food to the lion for that cycle to complete. So we're going to stop here on the dam wall, check out some bird life down at the water. So I don't know if Owen can see that lovely blacksmith lapwing down on the right there. Beautiful, just feeding on insects on the shoreline. The collective noun for these guys, quite a cool one, is a deceit, as in a lie. It comes from protective behavior that the parents do to look after the little young which hatch on the ground. When those young hatch, they're fairly defenseless. All they've basically got is their camouflage. But in order to keep those young safe, if the parents do spot something like perhaps a jackal coming along the shore, they put on the most remarkable display, flapping their wings, squawking, screeching. The parents will even land and pretend that they've got a broken wing, hopefully attracting the attention of that carnivore, and the parents will lead it off to a safe distance. The babies can move a little bit, and then hopefully by that stage the predator has lost interest.
Welcome back to Eco Training Pridelands. We're busy looking at a blue wildebeest, which is also known as a brindled gnu. And the name gnu comes from the sound that they produce as an alarm call. It's not the only species of wildebeest that we have. The other species is endemic to South Africa, and that's known as a black wildebeest, or also known as a white-tailed gnu. And some of the differences are in the horn structure, the size of the animals, and then also in the coat pattern. And as the name white-tailed gnu implies, the black wildebeest actually has a white tail tip, which you can use to differentiate it from. It's also very unique in terms of its distribution and only occurring in grassland areas. However, in the past, they were by accident introduced into a number of other conservation areas where blue wildebeest also occur. These days, you can be getting a stiff penalty if you actually have both of them on your property, as they have the potential of interbreeding. We do find that the wildebeest we have in South Africa is the same species that you will encounter in East Africa. However, our wildebeest will no longer migrate compared to those in East Africa. We find that they have all year round territories in the bulls compared to the mobile territories which you'll see with East African subspecies, which is often also referred to as a white bearded gnu. There's a few other things that I do find particularly interesting about them. Although we look at them, they are classified as antelopes. Their body plan doesn't resemble that of a typical antelope. If you wondered what is the closest relatives of a wildebeest, we're looking at animals such as tsessebe and hartebeest, and the bontebok and blesbok. One of the behavioral traits that they all share is that they have young that can stand very shortly after birth and can follow the parents immediately as if they have to move off. They also have an interesting relationship with a specific fly that lives in the nasal cavity as well, which is known as a nasal botfly. And these flies' larvae is often snorted out at their resting places, and once they have grown into the next phase of their life, they will go back up into the nostrils of these animals.
Here we have a Birchow's cuckoo, a bird that is common, but I don't get it on camera too often. It's just fascinating me. I don't know if you guys can see it in your screen, the big screen. So it's got something white on its head, on its beak, and it shouldn't have really. I don't quite know what it is. I'd love to see the black cuckoo. That bird is stunning. That coppery chestnut sheen in contrast with black. But their distribution is very, very low. They're actually classified as near threatened on the IUCN Red List. Thank you, Mel. My director's saying you can see it, but it's not really easy to tell what it is. I also can't really see through my binos, but it's definitely got something white on the top of its head. Lovely birds, very large. Females are larger than the males, but other than that, it's very difficult to tell the difference. The sexes are really similar. They're quite flighty, if that makes sense. If the vehicle parks too close to them, they'll fly away. But luckily, this one's far off in the distance. What is on your face, bird? I really that. The beak's normally entirely black. I don't know if it's just markings or droppings or... I'm really not sure. Monogamous bird. We went into great detail. Well, we spoke yesterday or the day before about monogamy and the different sort of ways that birds have their social structure. This one's monogamous. Megan, I hear you. You know that rusty chestnut color? That's one of my favorite colors in the world. I love it. I love wearing it. I think it's a gorgeous color, rust. And it really sort of sparkles out here. You can see it. Long tail feathers. Black tail feathers. And that's fairly common for birds, for the tail feathers to be very dark, because most tail feathers, the structure is slightly different. They're far more rigid. And melanin is pumped into those feathers to create that rigid and strong effect. And it really acts as a third leg. Why do no animals have a third leg? Why don't we find animals with 3 legs? Here's one theory that says it's the forbidden phenotype. An animal or plant that cannot and does not exist. But if you think about it, most animals have features that can act as a third leg. Meerkats, for example. Meerkats stand upright and they'll rest on their tail and their feet. The tail sort of substituting as a third leg. Woodpeckers. They use their tail feathers to balance on a tree, like a third leg. And that tripod stance doesn't require any extra energy. Whereas if you stand on your own 2 feet like we do, that's actually using muscle power and energy. Whereas if you use a feature that you already have, tails, tail feathers, you don't need to use any energy. Whereas if you had a third leg, you would. Indigo girl, very possibly. I am using my binos and I wish my eyesight was that good. But it could be a worm, a caterpillar, or a grub. You are correct. I'm just not sure why it would just sit there though. But absolutely, it could be. I really, really don't know. Anyway, you can actually go deep into the third leg theory. You should Google it. There's a fantastic paper on it into why you do not find animals with 3 legs. I mean, 3-limbed movement in insects, of course, they have 6 legs, so you will find that they have 3 on either side, so it's a 3-limbed movement. The limbs move in sets of 3, but that's not the same as, I guess, having 3 legs. This is the alternating tripod gait. That's what they call it with insects, but it's not having that tripod. It's actually a really fascinating topic. It goes down into the DNA of it and why. If you think about it, all animals are bilateral. So the code for having 2 sides to everything is embedded in our DNA. There's a left side and a right side, if you think about it. From very, very early on in the evolution of life. Maybe even before legs developed, there's that bilateral symmetry. Maybe even before fins or flippers. And is it a case of once that bilateral symmetry was baked in, then it was hard to change, and that's why animals with 3 legs didn't evolve? That's one theory. I mean, in science fiction, in the movies, you'll see it, but not in real life. Okay, I do want to bumble around to Gowrie Dam before the end of drive. Let's see if we can find anything happening down that side. But for now, we are going to send you guys over to Liam, who's got a lizard on a termite mound.
So Owen Eagle Eyes, behind the camera, has managed to spot something really interesting for us. This large lizard sunning himself on the side of a termite mound is a rough-scaled plated lizard. One of a number of species of plated lizard that we actually get in this kind of low-felt environment, but probably the most common to be seen in wooded savanna. A harmless omnivore. He likes to feed on things like insects, potentially fresh shoots, and they are particularly partial to very bright wild flowers. Something like the wild hibiscus that Tess was showing us a little bit earlier, very, very palatable to this rough-scaled plated lizard. As I say, quite partial to wildflowers. At a previous lodge that I worked at, there was one that lived around the staff accommodation. He was particularly partial to the brightly painted toenails of female staff members, enough to send anybody scurrying to higher ground. But as I say, harmless. He might have quite a strong nip, but certainly no venom, nothing nasty like that. Yeah, there are actually two of these plated lizards living in this termite mound, potentially a pair. Thanks, Paddington. Yeah, absolutely a stunning lizard. His colours are perhaps a little bit drab on this morning. I think potentially something to do with slightly overcast weather at the moment. Many of the reptiles that we deal with have photosensitive skin cells. So a little bit like a chameleon in kind of a sort of a way. When the temperatures are a bit lower, many of the reptiles, crocodiles included, will be a bit darker. That's an adaptation in an evolutionary sense to attract a little bit more heat. Obviously darker colours absorb more heat, more light. Now, he is ectothermic, so that's the scientific term for cold-blooded, but anybody who cares about reptiles doesn't like the term cold-blooded. Isn't he just, Momo? Absolutely. Very, very geometric patterns there. The scales organized almost like those of a crocodile, all in nice, neat rows. Yeah, really, really beautiful little animal. So they breed probably within this termite mound. In the summertime, the female will dig a hole, potentially in softer sand around the outside somewhere, into which she'll deposit possibly somewhere between 2 and about 6 soft-shelled eggs, which are temperature sex dependent. What that means is that the temperature of incubation affects the gender of those young little hatchlings, those neonates. So an easy way to remember it with both turtles, tortoises, and lizards is hot chicks, cool dudes. So slightly warmer temperatures, more towards maybe 32 or 33 Celsius. Those will produce female youngsters, and slightly lower temperatures for those males. It raises an interesting question, though, with climate change affecting our planet basically on all sides. Rapidly rising temperatures in some areas are showing herpetologists, people who study reptiles, that entire generations of reptiles are being born one gender, so either all male or all female. Now, while that may not sound too serious, obviously a time will come where that entire generation needs to breed, and there's an absence of the sex that's needed to make that possible. Yeah, a bit of a disaster. But yeah, studies are ongoing. We're trying to figure out what we can do to try and make that a bit better. Yeah, quite a handsome looking lizard. Though my mum has always said that these lizards look like Tom Jones. I'm not quite sure as a millennial that I get that reference, but the Tom Jones lizard, a rough-scaled plated lizard. Yeah, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, there was another rough-scaled plated lizard on the side of this termite mound when we pulled up. Almost certainly the mate of this individual. Very tough to tell at a distance which is male, which is female. But the assumption would be that the slightly larger one would be the female. Often with lizards, snakes, tortoises, etc., that's the case. Purely for the reason the female needs a larger body in order to hold a clutch of eggs. But yeah, the pair will be permanently based in this termite mound, provided a big cobra or something doesn't move in there. Yeah, the sun actually starting to come out a bit on us here at the moment. Great news for this lizard. He needs energy from the sun in order to kind of charge his internal batteries, give himself energy to slither around on this termite mound and find something to eat. They are lightning fast. They can certainly outrun a human being, but predators for them could include snakes, big eagles, perhaps a leopard if it was quick enough, some of the smaller cats.
We have circled back to quarantine, hoping, possibly, that there may be some ellies. And sadly, there are none. But it's such a beautiful way. The sun is slowly starting to pop its head out. It's still quite hazy and overcast, but the temperature is definitely changing. And quarantine's one of the most prettiest views you could find on the reserve. It's one of my favourite places on the reserve. It's very open. Lots of marulas scattered with silver cluster leaves at various different parts. Apple leaves. Some combretums. Hibiscus flowers, devil thorn, red star zinnias, termite mounds. And it should be buzzing with insect life. Chana, you're saying you love the relaxed drive this morning, easing into the week. Well, I really hope you enjoyed it. Didn't quite 100% get what we were looking for, but that's okay. There is always this afternoon. Hopefully we'll be able to pop in and check if the leopard, hopefully Mareebs, is back on that kill once again. It looked like there was a fair bit of meat left, but I have to say it was rather tricky to tell. Hopefully we'll have an active hyena den. Hopefully Tessa will find her lions. And all the animals will come out to play. But I'm so glad that you enjoyed this drive. There we go, the woodland kingfisher right on cue. Saying goodbye to you all. Oh, I thought we were going to go quiet there, but no such thing. But on that note, everyone, it has been an absolute pleasure to take you on a bumble. That's what it's all about. Having fun and seeing the nature out here, not taking life too seriously. But it wouldn't be the show if you guys didn't jump on board. So please do join us this afternoon for the Sunset Safari. And until then, ladies and gentlemen, have a fantastic day.